Hi, quick content warning. I have OCD and I know how bad it can get when you suddenly associate something bad with things like food. So if that sounds like you, I'd probably not watch any further. Nothing to worry about, just letting you know. I know I've stumbled across plenty of videos that set off my OCD and I couldn't eat for a week, so, take care. Hey up, I do. Can cats cause schizophrenia? I had a strange conversation with my auntie about cats recently. She claimed to have read that apparently they can, and you've met my auntie.
Antique pocket watch, it's like...
Obviously, I didn't believe her. So I did some digging, and I did actually find a recent study supporting the hypothesis that cat exposure could be associated with schizophrenia and other similar disorders. Not proving it, just supporting it. It's called Cat Ownership and Schizophrenia-Related Disorders and Psychotic-Like Experiences, a systematic review and meta-analysis. It's also be in the description and possibly also on the screen right now, if future me can be bothered. And reading through it, it's complicated to understand. They all are, so I'm gonna explain it. A systematic review is when you collect data from all the relevant studies. No one is conducting any experiments or surveys or interviews of their own. Imagine a jigsaw puzzle, but each piece can also stand alone as a perfectly nice and readable image, but combining them all gives you an even bigger picture. A meta-analysis is assembling the jigsaw. It's taking all of the data and smashing them together for an even bigger data pool. And it turns out there is a correlation between cat ownership and schizophrenia. Correlation doesn't equal causation, but these results basically say there could be something here. Someone should look into it more, maybe. It didn't say cats definitely cause schizophrenia. If you have a cat, you will develop schizophrenia, and if you have schizophrenia, a cat did it. So they dug through a bunch of different sources published between 1980 and 2023, all from around the world in various different languages. They did my favourite thing to do, which is backward citation search methods, which I do recommend if you're doing a thesis. I did, and it was the best way to find sources I ordinarily won't come across. It's exactly how it sounds. You find a study, read it, scroll down to the resources list, read some of them too. It's great. They considered in what ways someone could encounter a cat. Like, what does it mean to say exposure to a cat? You know, did they live with a cat? Did they lose an argument against a cat? Did they accidentally offend a cat? Because they are easily offended and they will let you know about it. Any kind of interaction with a cat, which I personally don't understand, because how on earth can you go through your entire life without interacting with a cat in some way or another? They're everywhere. They're taking over the world.
At what point did you forget that we're trying to take over the world?
Reading results is honestly one of the most daunting parts, because what do all these letters and numbers mean? For the studies reporting unadjusted odds ratios, ORN equals 10, the pooled OR was 2.14, 95% CI, 1.29 to 3.55. What the bloody hell are they chewing on? Well, I'll tell you what they're chewing on. So they went through 1,915 studies, narrowed it down to 106 for a full text review. What that means is they probably read the title and the abstract of the 1,915, and from that chose 106 to actually sit down and properly read and dive deeply into. And from there, they chose 17 individual studies and then split those two into two groups. Studies that didn't account for other factors and studies that did. What other factors? Things like age, environment, family history maybe. I don't actually know the specific factors because they'd have no reason to list them. I suppose the answer would be in one of the resources, but I will be here all day if I start doing that. All that's important to know is some did and some didn't. So the results here say that for the 10 studies that didn't adjust for other factors, we up north did and didn't sound almost exactly the same. Didn't adjust for other factors. The odds ratio, or the OR, was 2.14. Imagine this written as a ratio where the unaffected group, let's say, is 1. So 1 to 2.14. Or people who did come into contact with cats one way or another are just a little over 2 times more likely to develop schizophrenia and other psychotic-like experiences, or PLE, than people who have somehow lived their lives without becoming personally involved with a cat. I have said the word cat so many times, it doesn't mean anything anymore. 95% CI, 1.29 to 3.55. What the bloody hell is that all about? C1? What? CI means confidence interval, which has its own fancy formula. I'm not going to open that can of worms now because that's way too many worms all over the place and I can't be bothered to tidy them up. One of them will end up in a crack in the wall somewhere, and that is too big a problem to deal with right now. But I would love to do a video in the future explaining formulas, because formulas, they're not as hard as you might think. They're so daunting to look at, but once you get it, it's not that bad. Basically what this means in this study is they're 95% sure the ratio will be somewhere between 1.29 and 3.55, which 2.14 is. Which means you can move forward. If the results are outside of that range, you've probably made a bit of a cock-up somewhere. But regardless, one study does end up being removed. Do you remember in science lessons when you got to do a little experiment with a Bunsen burner or colour-changing liquids or, like, magnesium, and you were told to repeat the experiment 3 times in case there's an anomaly? Well, anomalies are a thing in psychology too, because it is a science. Shut up. Not you, people who say it isn't, you know, dickheads. We call them outliers, but it's the same thing. I don't know if the results were vastly different. I assume so. It just says one outlier study was excluded, so they calculated again and ended up with an OR of 1.56, meaning you're about 1.5 times more likely, which is still a bit, but not as dramatic as twice as likely. And then they took 5 of these studies that did adjust for other factors, which I know does not add up to 17. I don't know. I don't know where the other 2 studies went, but they took 5 of the studies that did adjust for other factors. Again, I'm not entirely sure what these factors were or how the studies were adjusted. Again, the answer will be in the references somewhere, but there's 41 of them and I'm tired. But to go through this quickly, an OR of 2.44 means cat acquaintances are a bit under 2.5 times more likely to develop schizophrenia. But then they had another look at the material, took one study and thought, this is a bit crap really, innit? And not very well designed, lacking a bit of detail. Whatever the case may have been, so they removed the outlier there too, and ended up with an OR of 2.4, which is not that big of a difference, still a little under 2.5 times more likely. So in conclusion, there could be a link, maybe, it's worth investigating. Sometimes in psychology you do have to do an awful lot of work, just to prove that maybe something might be worth looking into, perhaps. In psychology, it's important to remember that correlation does not equal causation, but with enough evidence, correlation could be worth investigating in the future, maybe, if you feel like it. And I could so leave this video here, but remember the backward citation search method? I did it. I can't help it. I go down so many bloody rabbit holes this way. So let's talk about toxoplasmosis. One of the many resources was association between infection with Toxoplasma gondii and psychiatric disorders. I'm not going to go into it in as much depth because that is just way too much information to throw at anyone, but essentially, if you've ever seen a mouse being way too friendly with a cat, probably has toxoplasmosis. Cats carry this, well, they can, they don't always, not all cats, but some cats can carry this parasite that does just that. If a small rodent is affected, it makes them not scared of the cat. A fatal attraction, if you will. It can make the rodent attracted to the cat's pheromones. It's very much like cats to have a parasite that makes you love them. According to the NHS, toxoplasmosis is a relatively common infection that can come from infected meat or cats. How to put it delicately, shit. Cat shit. However, it's rarely serious. Rarely. Not really. Rarely serious. Usually you just get flu-like symptoms and then it'll just piss off on its own. Though, like most things, it can be worse if you don't have the best immune system. Point I'm trying to make is don't be scared of your cat. Don't rub your face in cat shit. You're probably more likely to get it from infected meat than you are cat crap. This study also conducted a systematic review and found that 26% of people with OCD tested positive for T. gondii, compared to 17% of people without. So according to this, if you have OCD, you're twice as likely, again, to also have been infected with Toxoplasma gondii. But they also have a p-value of 0.119, which is quite a bit higher than 0.05, so it isn't statistically significant enough to say that toxoplasmosis definitely causes OCD, but still food for thought. Hi, hello, yes, I'm interrupting myself in editing because this article is getting to me. I need to explain that having a p-value of 0.119 is not statistically significant in any way. It doesn't mean throw the whole thing out. Like, the results can still be interesting, and that's why I'm still mentioning it, because it can still mean something. But I feel... Are you deliberately trying to mislead people by saying the estimation of the random effect model indicate a significant common odds ratio? Like, I feel like, you're not addressing the fact that you have a p-value of 0.119, just like a line saying, so the p-value isn't statistically significant, but, like, justify why it's still relevant. How can you just put that you have a p-value of 0.119 and then immediately say, thus T. gondii infection could be associated with OCD? You have no. Is it? What do you mean? With a p-value of 0.119? And then, because you're looking for a statistically significant p-value, so I feel like, are you saying significant in the line, in the sentence, hoping that people won't misinterpret it and just, like, in their heads think, oh, significant, that's what we're looking for significance, when really that's not what you mean. You're saying that twice as likely, which is significant, but that's not, you can't just not say anything. You can't just not say anything about having a p-value of 0.119 and then immediately say, yes, so it could be linked then, could it? Why? Like, keep hold of it. Mention it. It's still important. You still did the research. You have to mention having a statistically insignificant p-value. You can't just not mention that. Like, it needs to be, if you have a p-value that's not statistically significant, like at the conventional 0.05 level, I feel like it should be clearly communicated more than that. Like, yeah, you wrote it, but you also, I don't know, it feels odd. You should talk about the implications. And I know this is just a reference, but, like, you could have talked about the implications in just one line. I feel like you're trying to mislead me. Address it. Just say it. Don't even take up a whole sentence. Half a sentence is fine. Just mention it. I would love to go into p-values again another day, but basically, it needs to be somewhere close to 0.05 to be relevant. ADHD is also brought up. It was found that people with the T. gondii infection were twice as likely to also have ADHD than not. Hi, it's me again. The article says the results showed a statistically non-significant association between exposure to T. gondii infection and increased risk of ADHD. OR equals 2.02, P equals 0.014. But a p-value of 0.014 is absolutely statistically significant, and an OR of 2.02 is a correlation. I'm starting to wonder if this was the article that was thrown out, actually. I just not understanding as much as I thought I did. What about schizophrenia? Stop going down these rabbit holes and stick to the title. So, do cats cause schizophrenia? I don't know. No one really knows. They could, I suppose, maybe. If they did, it wouldn't really be them. It'd more likely be the Toxoplasma gondii. It can mess with your neurotransmitters and can affect brain chemistry. And a lot of neurological disorders, your levels of dopamine, the happy one with the motivational poster on the wall, and serotonin, the one that regulates your mood and stuff and lets you sleep, are not quite where they should be. And toxoplasmosis can increase dopamine. People with schizophrenia usually have increased dopamine levels. People with OCD, like me, probably also have high dopamine levels. And I've been surrounded by cats all my life. Maybe I've been infected with toxoplasmosis myself, and that's why I am the way that I am. There's no concrete proof either way. Don't be scared of your cat. Wash your hands. Don't eat cat shit, I suppose. And I would definitely be keeping an eye on this topic, because there's no concrete evidence, but I'm interested. And most studies like this are they're basically saying, look, can someone please just... Like, look, it's interesting, look, just do something. Just prove or disprove something, please, somebody, anybody out there. So that's basically what these kinds of studies are. I am interested. I am going to send this absolute cat shit to my auntie. And on that note, I'm off. Sithy.